Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, as always, and this week we are joined by Hersh Rephun. I'm hoping that I'm close. I'm hoping that I'm close. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, CK. You are very, very close. It's
Okay.
The closest you could get would be Rephun with an emphasis on the first syllable, but it is like a trick for people.
So say it. You say it.
My guest today is Hersh Rephun.
So the way you're saying Rephun,
Yeah, that's
is the right
it.
way.
That's it.
Rephun.
Yeah, but the accent's on the first syllable. So you're putting rep is the emphasis, and then hoon is the after part. So it's rep.
Rephun.
Yeah.
Rephun.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You have a long history of fun and cool, interesting things in your life, and some ups and downs for sure. And yes, brands. So let's start back. Let's go back.
Yeah.
I like to always go back a little bit. Younger Hersh, like just starting out in adulthood, leaving the nest. Like, what was that like for you?
That was it was something I wish I could do over in the sense that I was in New York. I was doing stand-up comedy. I was working in advertising in a niche of advertising, which was representing directors of TV commercials, which I didn't even know was a thing until I met a friend who was working for someone who was doing that. And I was going to school of visual arts and I was studying filmmaking, but I was doing stand-up comedy and working part-time for a publicist. That's how I was making a living. And I thought, I don't want to do PR for sure. I want to be the client, right? That was my mindset. Was I'm going to be a writer, screenwriter, actor, comedian. That was really it. Then I started representing directors, and I was like, I really like the camaraderie of being so close to other artists. And I would write their bios and put press releases out on them. And I kind of became a de facto publicist, all the while saying, I'm not going to be a publicist. I'm going to be the client. I'm going to be the client. And I ended up, though, I was newly married. We were having our first child. So it started to become a little more real in terms of needing to make a living and have a career that was evolving. So I started doing that PR for commercial filmmakers in earnest and started my own firm. And it grew into a real business. And still, I was screenwriting. I was getting a little credit here and there on small projects. I was sporadically doing stand-up comedy. And I say I wish I had it to do over because it isn't like I would change any major pieces, but I would probably appreciate the fact that here I was in the epicenter of entertainment, and I eventually went to LA, but even so, being in New York, being in that comedy scene, I just think I wasn't stopping to look at where I was. I was worried about where I wasn't. I was like, okay, I'm not making a lot of money. I'm not famous. I'm not, everything was what I'm not. And I think that is what I would change. I would go back there to that kind of miraculous spot and say, okay, maybe there's some things I need to do to make this make this something incredible. But I won't be too hard on myself. It was I did obviously take advantage of those things, but I just feel like I had a very strong feeling of being like 23 or 24 and not having made it yet, right?
But I feel like that's part and parcel now. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, I feel like that is, well, for one, it's the human condition
yeah,
until you reach, I think, most often a certain age, or if you've gone through it to a certain degree to realize that, you know what, there was times in my life where I was so focused on everything I didn't have that I didn't stop to appreciate everything I did have.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like, yeah, so and to be 24, like you're still figuring that out. So
yeah,
yeah. And the do-over to show gratitude, I mean, that makes my wheels turn because I think of myself and not doing anything like what you were doing in my 20s. I was a dumpster fire in my 20s. Um, but there were parts of my 20s where I could definitely say I should have been more grateful for the things that have presented themselves and the opportunities I got
yeah.
to experience. Yeah, that's interesting. So you were doing this work in New York, you met your wife, you had a child, and then you're moving on through, like, you've got your business that you're
Well,
working.
I was still I didn't open really my own firm in earnest until we moved to Los Angeles, and even then, the trajectory was that uh, I got married, we had our first child, had our second child, and our third before we moved to Los Angeles, and honestly, I think until I got to Los Angeles, I had just been focusing on surviving. Growing family like that at a very young age is a lot to bite off. My wife was becoming an attorney, but for part of that time was still in law school. I even worked at the law school for a while. That got her a break in tuition and was a kind of a stable job. But I was still doing stand up at night. But um, but I think until I moved to LA and started really pushing the screenwriting, I wasn't I didn't I wasn't independent in that sense. I was like I was working for companies. I was cobbling that living together. I actually wasn't doing badly, but um, but I didn't have the emotional independence to say, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I was trying to balance everything and please my wife at the time, and um, and so I think honestly, I minimized what I was capable of doing. Uh, it's a lot that I'm kind of like throwing out in like but there was a
No,
lot
that
of emotions.
well, that's organic though.
Yeah.
That's your it's so I have to ask. The move to Los Angeles, sorry, was like you were chasing something or you had something.
Well, so I had been growing my career in the commercial production world, and I had a couple of small credits on movies, on indie, low budget kind of genre movies, and um, and I met a manager named Catherine James who had been Quentin Tarantino's manager, and she was a very lovely woman and very smart. And she said, you really need to move to LA. And so she actually helped me find a job in the commercial production world. And I moved out, and I also helped my wife get a job at a law firm not shortly thereafter. So the move was I was chasing a more of a Hollywood career, but I was employed. I was
Mhm.
working at a commercial production company doing their PR, doing also as a sales rep for the directors. Um, but I think in my mind everything was always split in two. I had the career I wanted and the career I had. That was the dichotomy. And it was only when I after my divorce, and a lot of it was over the fact that we weren't on the same page about what we should be pursuing. you know she was like, you need to pursue stability and stop playing around with screenwriting, and I was like, well, I need to do the screenwriting and break through that barrier. you know and I don't think either one of those was really the answer. The answer was for me to be free to be industrious. That was kind of the answer. So after the divorce, I started that PR firm with a partner, and it was very successful, and a lot of validation from that, but still thinking, I still wanted the big brass ring is the movie business. Always with the movie business, always the eye on the movie business. And but it did afford me the stability and the kind of irrefutable success, in a way of saying, okay, well, I'm covering everything. My wife and I were no longer together, but at least I was experiencing success, and that was good for her, and it was good for the kids. So, and it was good for me, I think, for my self-esteem. But the trajectory was not yet complete. It was okay. How am I going to reconcile that Hollywood bug, and what my one of my best friends calls the fame bug? How was I going to reconcile that fame bug? Here I was, still a publicist for artists, for commercial artists, filmmakers, directors, writers, composers, visual effects artists, editors, and I wasn't the client, and so I still had that feeling I should be the client. I should be the client. Um, and I did. I was a creative director in the sneaker world. I was, as a copywriter, creative director. Again, I was achieving some more success, but still thinking, you can't. I think you can't truly be successful if you don't think this is where you're supposed to be, right? So you can have success, but it's going to hold you back somewhat if you feel like, you know, uh, I'm not supposed to be this. I'm supposed to be on the other side somehow. And I think it was during COVID, actually, that I finally it finally clicked for me, that I started doing a podcast, and and I was talking to people from all over the place with all kinds of interesting stories. It's called Truth Tastes Funny, the podcast. It's about
Yes.
surviving and thriving in a chaotic world. And I felt like I wanted to work with personal brands. I didn't want to work with, big sneaker brands or any other kind of consumer brand anymore. I wanted to have a personal engagement with someone who's trying to get their brand off the ground, and not quite be a publicist and not quite be a copywriter, but just be what I ultimately called myself, which is a holistic brand therapist, you know, helping people break through their personal development on one side, and their professional breakthrough. But they tend to be people who have accomplished stuff, but they're on a new plane, or they need to get to a new plane, or they're going to try something a little different. And so that's when I finally felt like, yeah, this is one. I'm getting up in front of audiences and speaking. I'm on the mic as a host and guest. I'm respected in my field for all the things I've accomplished, and that's kind of where I felt most at home. And I
Mhm.
realized, yeah, maybe this idea of the fame thing, everybody has an ego, but maybe this idea of being a stand-up comedian or whatever it was not what I really wanted. It was just my idea since childhood of what I thought I wanted. I went back in my 40s and did stand-up comedy in LA like almost every night for a year and really became quite good at it. And that was when I realized, okay, well now I really have to make a decision. Am I going to go on the road as a stand-up comedian? I made this decision in maybe 2016, 17. Am I going to go on the road as a stand-up comedian, or am I going to put that career, quote unquote, to bed and say, look, you've done it. You've done all the clubs in LA and New York. You've done clubs in across the country. You could keep going and try to be a name or whatever it is you want to pursue. Or you can find this other thing that is just allows you to be one thing. And I realized that one thing that I was supposed to be was this, now an author, holistic brand therapist. Really, just that was satisfying, and I was like, okay, maybe that's. I don't know if there's such a thing as destiny. I think destiny can be what you want it to be. Is somebody said that I was Bob Lancer. I don't know if you know who he is. I just have been exposed to him. He's a um, a life coach, and he said, your destiny is what you want is your destiny. So in other words, what you want is what you're going to get. So if you really want to be something, you'll be that thing. You may not even know you want it. That's the question.
Mhm.
Do you know you want it or not? And I think all this time I had that comedian or actor idea in my head, both of which I've done, both of which I can do, both of which I think I'm good at. But I just don't think that was what I wanted, or I would have done it. You know, I don't know that I would have been a movie star. But I would have done it, right? Like people who are actors their whole lives. That's because that's what they want, and they do it. And maybe they make a lot of money, maybe they don't, but that's what they do.
Well, I think that that's just it. I think that you do have actors out there who are career actors who people don't know who they are. They guest spot in
Yeah,
television shows or tiny spots in movies, or they're doing stage plays, whatever the situation is. And I feel like there's a component of they want it and accept that this life may never be the Academy Awards or
right.
blockbuster sort of thing, and are okay with the struggle to an element, because there is a lot of struggle and uncertainty in that lifestyle to be an actor. Like, I've met many, I know many, like, it's not easy, that
No,
lifestyle. So if ultimately that was your dream, to be a comedian, to be an actor, but the other part of your dream was to have stability, security even, then maybe the two just didn't jive.
they didn't. I think more than the word stability would be family, where I have 5 kids. I had 3 kids with my first wife. My wife and I now have 2 kids, and I feel like that isn't necessarily conducive to the actor's lifestyle or an
No.
itinerant lifestyle of a comedian or an actor or any of that stuff. And so I would rather have this. And I also think a friend of mine posted on Facebook today that she always wanted to be a rock star, and now she's succeeding in business or whatever. But her fantasy was being a rock star. And what's your fantasy? And then it struck me this afternoon. I was like, well, maybe my fantasy is being successful in business. Like I would have thought it was being a star, quote unquote, of some stage and screen or whatever you want to call it. But I think the business part that I had almost resisted all the time was really the maybe the thing that interested and intrigued me, because the other stuff was just very natural to me. It didn't, it was natural. I love it, but there's a reason. There's a reason for
Yeah,
everything.
it's very interesting too because I think there's a lot of parallels between you and I. Like when I was growing up, like all I wanted to be myself was an actor.
Where did you
Um,
grow up, CK?
in Newfoundland, Canada,
Ah, okay,
so like very tiny island.
right.
Um, so I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to be a singer, and this was the dream, and it was the dream for so long. And I myself have found my, I guess, purpose, my what I'm really strong at in transformation consulting, and it's just really it's really interesting. So I think my fantasy has stayed the same. Like, but like I haven't taken like you've done it. You have acted, you've written screenplays, you've done the comedian, the circuit, that sort of thing. I haven't done any of that. I did some extra work in my early 20s. Um, I and so I think my fantasy still remains like I guess maybe a star, but at the same time, and this is what's really interesting to me is that I think for a long time it's the glitz, the glam, the options, the notoriety, all of those particular things that are so drawing, right? To receive accolades for just being your talented self. And like that's the draw. But no one talks about the ugly side of that.
Yeah,
And there's a severely ugly side and a severely vain side and egotistical side and shady side to all of this to really to get to that place. And as I've grown older, my capacity or my ability to handle any form of fakeness, right?
any
Or
form of
BS,
what?
fakeness,
Oh, fakeness. Yeah.
inauthenticity,
Well, here's I'll
um,
give you a new word for it: authenticity.
both,
Authenticity.
no, I like it.
In my book,
Authenticity.
I use that term because everybody threw around the last few years authenticity as though it was like, something special. Oh, you know what kids today want, consumers? They want authenticity as opposed to bullshit. They want authenticity, right? So I was like, well, what they don't want is authenticity. They don't want you coming on like you're real, but you're really not.
You're not. Yeah, exactly. So like my ability for that might to deal with that is like down here.
Uh-huh. Me too.
Like so like it's just I am at the era in my life where I want a quiet saltbox house by the sea with a sewing room and a solarium. Like
Uh-huh.
that's where I'm at. Like that's my dream, right? We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, you're gonna tell us all about your book, Selling Truth, a Semoir, and your Yes brands. We'll be right back, everyone.
Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking to Hersh Rephun. Did I do it good? Okay, okay. And we were talking about his life leading up to now. And there was a lot of cool stuff that you did in there, right? Like
Yeah.
ups and downs and that sort of thing. But I mean, I mean, for a lot of people to be sharing the same space with like movie execs and directors and producers and all of that that's like a pretty fun, I'm sure, lots of cool stories from that time in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But you said the old PR dried up in like with the pandemic because well many things dried up in the pandemic. And so the pandemic hit and it sort of forced you to recalibrate, if you will. And you came out with Yes Brands, but also, oh, it's not right in front of me. Don't tell me. I have to, I'm trying to sharpen my memory. Um, the Truth Tastes Funny podcast, right?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you wrote a book called Selling Truth, a Semoir. And so tell us about these things.
Here it
I
is.
like it.
You have
Let's
the
start with the
large.
book.
You have the large size book, or you can get the tiny one that fits in the palm of your hand back there. You get that.
Okay.
Selling the truth. Yeah, selling the truth, and I call it a semoir with insights for life and business. I call it a semoir because that stands for semi memoir, because it is like it has anecdotes from my life, but it's also stories that pertain to life and business. So if I learned a
Hmm.
business or a life lesson from it, it's in there. But I'm not like I was born here and then this happened and this happened. My sister asked me if she's in the book, and I said, well, this book is not about family trauma. This book is about. She laughed. We're all funny, my sisters and I. But I said, you're in the acknowledgments. She said, well, of course I am. But it's stuff that pertains to what I learned about really being yourself and selling the truth about yourself, which is all you really have to sell. You can lead people on, you can try to fake them out, like we were just talking about before the break. We were talking about fakeness and authenticity, and it's like, but where does that get you in the end? And when I say where does that get you, of course it's what you want out of life. If it gets you a jet or something, great. But it's like, what do you really want to be happy and love yourself? you know People who we were talking about, being an actor or a celebrity, and how that takes a lot of, I wouldn't call it self-love. It takes a lot of need. You have to have a lot of need to fill that all the time. Get up on stage and fill that, go in the movies and fill that, go in a premiere and fill that need. Now, not every actor has that, but the ones that do, that's a lot to fill. That's a lot to pour into that hole, and everybody around you has to pour it into that hole too. And that's just not, you and I. We found out that wasn't really what we wanted. Um, Selling the truth helps, I hope, uh, people who are new to business, people who are changing their lives, or just haven't found that thing that unifies their self-image, and are looking to kind of find the truth. We live in this post-truth world in many ways. It's just we don't know what to believe. We don't know what's real. AI can fool us. Broadcast news can fool us. Everything has a way of kind of presenting a truth that we don't trust. And so I was just like, with humor and with humanity, how can I do my part to help us all stay on some kind of path, some kind of road to reality without it driving us crazy.
So that's, and I feel, I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast or if I don't know. But yeah, we are in an era of distrust
Yeah,
more so than ever before. And you're right, like those key things, once upon a time, we could trust that there was integrity in journalism and that what we were seeing on the news wasn't wrapped in agenda. But, even the language, if you look at news broadcast in the 90s and early 2000s to news broadcast now, their language has changed.
yeah,
It's no longer, speculation or alleged or these particular things or this, whatever. Now it's just this is the situation, this is the fact,
Yeah.
right? And I personally would love to fight for legislation where if it's an opinion, they have to highlight that on the screen to say that this is an opinion piece or whatnot. But we that's another podcast altogether.
Yeah.
And I love I mean, this is how I took it. You may not have meant it that way, but I love the sort of call out to current events with the jet comment you just made a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And by the way, CK, I said that just off the cuff, but I recognized when I said it, that,
I
oh,
was like that. I was like, that's perfect,
yeah,
really, because it is. Talk about faux. Although I don't know if he's authentic.
yeah,
I think he's authentically like
yeah.
that. But another podcast.
Yeah,
Um,
but since you brought it up, the why where that goes is not a place of like negativity or saying I don't like Trump or whatever it is. It's I don't, but that's not the point. It's that um, if there was real self love there, right? If there was real love, because the more you love yourself, the more you have to give other people. And if you really love yourself, you're not a narcissist. A narcissist is infatuated with themselves in terms of their consumption about it. They just can't. They have nothing to give other people. That really indicates, in most people's opinion, a lack of self love. So the airplane, what does it fill, right? Whereas, let's just say the new pope, because we don't know, we don't, we're still trying to figure out, who Pope Leo is, but the signs are pointing to someone with a real, moral compass, right? So, if you gave that guy a plane, I doubt that he would put it in the Vatican library, right? Or fly around in it. He would probably sell it and give them or use it to fly food to people who need food, or sell it and give the money to people who are out of work, maybe people that have been put out of work, who are veterans who worked for the government or something like that. They would think of something like that because they would think, oh, I want to do something out of love. It doesn't mean they wouldn't get nice clothes. It doesn't mean they wouldn't buy a nice watch. It just means that they would also have this capacity to love other people. My next book, I shouldn't even talk about the next book, but it's the follow up to this that I'm working on now, is called The Inevitable Yes, which came from a slump I had where I couldn't close deals. I was not, and you think, I'm in a slump, and it's everything is no, every answer is no. And then I realized, well, if you put negativity into the world, something's going to come back negative, But if you only put positivity out there, eventually you're going to get a yes. So eventually the yes is inevitable, and that's where that title came from. And I really try to live that, you know. I
mhm.
if I curse people out, it's only in the solitude of my bathroom, where no one else can hear me. And I go, oh, that mother, you know. But I really don't talk crap about other people. I really feel, and I feel the same way with someone like Trump. I feel there's a lack of love in there, or bestowed upon, that no love from all the MAGA people and all the other people can ever fill. And surely he knows that the cabinet members, when they go around the room and talk to him like he's Kim Jong Un, I think he knows that that's not love. I don't think he thinks that's love. If he did, the same people who were with him in his first administration never would have left, and they would be with him today instead of being, on the other side. They've left him, they've abandoned him for some reason, most of them. So, that's it. I mean, I'm not, I really, when I was a little kid, my mom, I said, oh, I hate this or that, or I hate this person. I was like 7 or 8 years old. My mom said, hate is a very strong word, and you probably shouldn't really use it, which was profound because it was like, wow, so no, shouldn't really hate anyone. It was,
And that's what I love.
yeah,
This is lining up with recent, I had a podcast last week that I did where I talked about how angry I was and how helpless I felt in the current situation. But I don't hate Trump. I don't actually have hate for
right,
anyone.
yeah,
It took a long time of like personal healing and learning to love myself to realize that I don't hate anyone.
that's right,
Hate Hating someone only harms you. It doesn't hate that. It doesn't harm
yeah,
them. Like really, in the greater scheme of things, unless you're acting on said hate, but that's a different story. For me, Trump is despicable. Like I think he's despicable, and I do not like anything about who he is as a
yeah,
person or what he's doing in office. However, at the end of the day, he's still a human being,
yeah.
and we have to show kindness and love. But kindness and love doesn't always have to be nice.
Right. And that's one of the things is that if you can be tough on someone, like that was another lesson I learned from my parents was, you know, they're only punishing me, let's say, if I got some privilege taken away, they would say, "Well, we're only punishing you because we love you, because we care. If we didn't care about you, we would let you do whatever you want because who cares?" And that also made a big impression on me later when I was an adult and a parent telling my little kids, I'm only punishing you because I love you, they would be like, no, you don't. No, you don't love me.
It doesn't
No,
feel like that in the moment.
but in the moment, but I'm confident they all know and appreciate that I love them. So, uh, I think that tough love is just that. It's love first and foremost. And if we recognized that it came from a place of caring. And for example, when we're watching a press conference and a reporter asks a question and the response is that they're bad or they're fake or they're this or they're that. Now, granted, they're not giving tough love, but the love that they have is for the truth, let's say, or they have a love of fairness, or they have a love of underserved communities, or they have a love of something, and they're simply trying to figure out an answer to something. The deflection of truth, and this speaks to and I didn't make this a political book at all. I don't believe I get into that in any way in the book, but I think the idea of deflecting the truth, I do have a chapter. I have a chapter called "The Spin Doctor, the Bullshit Artist, and Other Seducers We Don't Want to Know, Like, or Trust." But that's about what I've experienced in my own life. People who've taken advantage of me, people who have been charlatans or con artists. Um, but the same rule applies to them. Those
Mm-hmm.
people are broken and they're human, but we certainly don't need to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of their own fractured psyche.
Agreed. Agreed. So, Yes Brands.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're doing with Yes Brands.
So, yes brand comes from the yes and rule of improvisational comedy. I did improv for a long time as well. And one of the rules is you accept the offer of your scene partner, no matter how bizarre, no matter how crazy. You know, they say all the headphones are on fire, and you say yes, and it's creating a beautiful smoke in the air that's making everybody high. I'm just adding on to the craziness of the other person because otherwise the scene dies there. Headphones are on fire. No, they're not. They're frozen. Like, that's not funny. I just shot down what the other person said. I have to build on it. So, yes, brand was the same idea, but working with my clients, to build on what their story is, not to say, oh, you know what, you're gonna be this now, and that's what'll sell. Don't be yourself. You have to get a new suit, and you got to do this, and you got to wear a toupee, and you got to put glasses on. No, it's not that. It's who are you really, really, really at your core, and how is that? How can that be used to better serve your goals? And your personal brand is just a lever. It's just something you use to achieve a goal. And whatever the goal may be, I can help you if we're a good fit. Let's say I'll say my prospective clients, if we're a good fit, I can help you make that work for you. But obviously, if we're talking, something's not quite clicking to get you to that goal.
Fair. And I'm sure that there's people who have massive blocks left, right, and center with where they want to be and how they're going to achieve it. And I mean, I just only had a few moments to really think, but of what I'm trying to achieve in my life. And it's interesting to me because I see, those people out there who are doing the daily grind and they're really putting in the hours and all those things. And that's fine. But there's a lot of stuff that people do that I feel like is peddling.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that come back to my integrity as a human being and my commitment to authenticity. So like I am not someone who will sell you a lie. Or I don't even like compliments, to be honest, because they make me uncomfortable. But that's fine. That's work that my therapist and I will get through one day. But
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff that I see people doing that feels, I don't know, extra maybe. I don't know really what the word is. Whereas I am like, I'm a transformation consultant and I'm a good one. I do know that. I am good at what I do. But I often think about like the universe is lining up stuff like it's going to come to me. I have no clue how to market myself in that space without feeling cringy,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right? And that's the last thing I want to do. And sure, I can go and spend the money and get like fancy like commercials done for LinkedIn and whatever, or that sort of thing. That's not who I am. Like I'm not really a flashy person. I used to be but I was broken.
Mm-hmm.
That's the funny part. Very healed version of Curtis is just chill and like we're gonna get the work done and let's just do it right the first time, sort of thing. So yeah, so when I think about that whole sort of what you're doing, where you've niched down and you're helping people develop their brand and who they are, I think that that's an important role to be played and needed in the world.
Thank you. Well, first of all, to go back to what you said about not having, you're like, I haven't really had time to think about my personal brand in a certain way. Well, a lot of us don't have time to think about ourselves in that way. Um, we think of it as self-aggrandizing or cringy, right? The idea of doing those things that other people are telling us to do quite often are really not the things we need to do. I say all branding is personal. I say, you know, look inside yourself. Let's talk about where you started. Let's talk about where you want to go, and then let's put a filter that helps translate what you are about and what you mean and what you want to your audience based on what they want. And by the way, that's where a lot of people get hung up is who's their audience. And if
Mm.
you don't know who your audience is, then that will mess with your messaging and mess with how you present yourself to, because if my audience are bikers, let's just say my audience is bikers, and I go to a hippie festival, a flower festival, most likely I'm not going to do well with that audience. And if I am going to do well with that audience, I should peak like a comedian does, right? See what the crowd looks like, see what they're laughing at, get to know what that audience wants, and then figure out how to play to them. Not
Yeah.
not not play to the audience, that's the wrong audience. So the right audience and the right persona and calibration, but the cringy stuff comes from, and we all, I think, have gotten close to that or experienced that, by trying to do what seems to work for other people, and other
Yeah.
people saying, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, you got to do this and you got to do that, because that's what works for you. But there are things that work. Like my book, I think, is for people who want to use honesty and they're not quite sure how to leverage it. They're not quite sure how to use honesty, but they sincerely want to. And
Yeah.
they could be people who have tried faking it and who have been cringy, and they just don't like it. They may have worked. They may be making money, but it just, they're tired of that. They don't want to be that. That's exhausting. It's
Yeah. I
exhausting.
feel like it's
You
very
know,
taxing.
it's very taxing. And uh, I think I learned that about the way I was doing comedy when I was doing voices and characters and impressions and stuff. And and I could do them, but something was missing. And when toward the latter part of my foray into stand up, I just would wear a black t shirt, go on, talk, be myself, talk about what I was going through, then go into maybe an impression or a character or an accent. But there was a time in my life when I would go into, like, I would meet my friends in a bar, and within 5 minutes I would be some other character, just having fun and talking to people and doing all that. But that wasn't me, right? It wasn't what I wanted, but I had to figure that out, you know. Um, but I think there is a way to present ourselves honestly and truthfully and compellingly, and in fact more compellingly than we would present if we were trying to fake something or do the best practices, like you say, the fancy videos or some people, their brand is slick, polished, very cool, very upscale video, let's say, is a great, transmission thing for them, because maybe that's what they are. They're very polished, they're very finely, calibrated and all that stuff. But other people are more relaxed, and so I like the nuance. I like the, okay, I want to look good. I want it to look good. I want it to sound. I want it to be nice, But I want to be real. I don't want to be untouchable or unattainable. You know. Um,
Yeah.
so there's just a way to do that, no matter who you are. You know.
So being mindful of time, we are, if someone wanted to work with you, yes, brand, they could go to your website to
Yes.
request that.
Yes. Yes. I try not
Okay.
to make it difficult. I don't want to make it
Yeah.
difficult for people to find me or reach me. So yeah, if they go to yesbrandbuilders.com, because technically that's the firm, is Yes Brand Builders. If they go to yesbrandbuilders.com, they'll find ways to, they'll see my services there. They can see my videos, which are nice but not super fancy. they'll see they'll see my story. They'll see my clients' stories. So everything can be found there. My podcasts are there. My book is there. They can also go directly, if they want the book, they can go directly to sellingthetruthbook.com.
Okay.
sellingthetruthbook.com will take them to where they can buy
Is
it.
it also available in like other stores?
Yes, it's available on barnesandnoble.com, and it's available. This was an interesting choice I made because I've always been a real fan of indie booksellers. You know, the shop that there's only one, right? Whether it's the Strand in New York, LA, those places where they would have those bookstores. So I'm in Iowa City. There's a bookstore called Prairie Lights, which is in downtown Iowa City, and it's really well known, but it's a hometown, bookshop, and so it's available there. It's going to be on their website. There was a version on their website that was the wrong. It wasn't the book, and it wasn't the finished book. I don't know. A previous publisher that I had been working with at the time had put it up there, and then they had to take it down. So they're going to have, like, I was just in there yesterday. They're going to have Selling the Truth, my my book, available for purchase there. But it's also there if someone's in Iowa City and goes in and wants to buy a physical copy. They have it, but they also have a great online presence. So if someone wants to support independent booksellers, right, and they go, okay, well, I would rather buy it from prairielights.com than from barnesandnoble.com, it's available in both places.
Amazing. All right, so we're gonna link your website in the description, and so get out there and buy "Selling the Truth," a Semoir. I like this. Check out. Oh, it's gone from my brain. Don't tell me. No. See, this is the goldfish part. Check out Truth Taste Funny podcast.
Very good. Yeah.
One day I will remember all those things. And also you have a blog on here. And if you're out there and you're interested in growing your brand, personal brand, and want expert advice on that, you want to reach out to Hersh to get that started. And then also, don't forget, now I try and remember the name of the future book that's coming.
Well, that they don't have to remember because it's not available yet. But
not available yet, but well, yeah. So just know that there's a book coming.
yeah,
The Inevitable Yes.
yes,
That's what.
yes.
Okay.
That's right.
See, okay, my memory's not that bad. All right, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Hersh, for being on the show. I appreciate it immensely. And to everybody out there, get out and live your wildest dreams. Until next time.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.